Good morning, everybody. I'm coming to you today from Jekyll Island down here in Georgia. And I got down here yesterday afternoon for a conference today. And I'm looking forward to coming home tonight. But it's kind of interesting. My home airport is Chicago O'Hare, and I fly out of there twice a week usually. And of all the times I have to fly, this might be the only time I wish I could have had a delay, because yesterday's mesoscale convective system, or squall line, or bow echo, that came out of parts of South Dakota, hit Nebraska and Iowa, and then kind of fell apart here in northern Missouri. It's not on this animation, okay? But the one that came through here left storms that kind of rode along a frontal boundary. We mentioned it yesterday. That came right here into parts of the Chicagoland area. Now, to the north of it, as you watch this reset again, you'll see that what was left of that storm system, here it goes again, did produce much needed rain through parts of Wisconsin and Michigan. But on the tail end of it here, down in northern Illinois, we saw the skies clear out, rapidly destabilize, and we had the wind shear from this mesoscale convective system into northern Illinois that provided what we needed to get storms to rotate. And why I wish I could have stuck around was because tornadoes got very close to O'Hare. The National Weather Service kind of put together a good summary, a preliminary summary of where those tornadoes were yesterday. This is the National Weather Service out of Chicago, and you can just see where they're currently going out to do surveys today. But if you want to see some of the pictures of this, if you didn't see them in the news or whatever, just go to my Twitter feed. My Twitter handle is Snodgers, so I took the A out of my last name. Actually, I didn't. The University of Illinois did, and I just kind of adopted it. They kept an 8-character ID, kind of a relic to his, past computing when we used to have 8-bit systems, and so I kind of liked it. So I'm Snodgers on Twitter, and I need to update this picture. I've had a beard for 3 years now, and that picture is probably from like 2010, so I don't quite look that young anymore. But if you scroll through here, you'll see tons of pictures of what it looked like, and one of my favorites, which I wish I could have been there for, was these down here that show the lines of people that were underneath down below low levels here in Chicago O'Hare Airport. And one of my favorite follows, Storm Chaser Nick, great guy, puts out always some funny stuff. He wrote the Garrett Popcorn Shop line at O'Hare. If you've ever been to O'Hare, you got to get popcorn from that place. But anyway, go check out the pictures. They're amazing. It'll kind of keep you up to date on what happened. Now, when you look back at it, this is what the storm reports look like from yesterday. The real action, I know there were nasty storms in the Chicagoland area, but it was what reinvigorated later in the day in parts of Missouri. And that was one of the storms I was definitely counting on to return rainfall to parts of Missouri that have been extremely dry. Now, when we just look at this whole setup and try to assess where the rain is and where it's going to be going here, I thought today I'm going to give you a little bit of a longer morning briefing, because I won't get home tonight till about 2 a.m. and I won't have a time to do in-depth report tonight because of all the flights trying to get home. So let's kind of cover all of that in this morning's report. We'll just pick up with our normal cadence of in-depth reports next Monday night. So here it is. We've been talking about a pattern break, and I'm going to show you what broke to bring us all of this precipitation. For weeks on end in May and June, this was not here. Okay, see this deeper trough of the Hudson Bay? That was not there. We saw this ridge sitting somewhere between Hudson Bay all the way over to western parts of Canada. So what changed was this larger ridge that took shape in this part of the country. And again, we've been saying that Texas ridge was critical to breaking down this entire pattern. So what the atmosphere did was produce just flow in a place where there was no flow, right in through here. So coming over the top of that ridge, the speed just picked up, and that's what initiated better chances of bringing in precipitation. This also set up a sharper temperature boundary. In fact, that's why there are winds here in the upper levels of the atmosphere, because a temperature boundary set up in the lower part of the atmosphere. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But I want to just kind of showcase what this pattern break did, because you look just back over the last 24 hours. Again, here was the next round of rain that moved through this particular area. Here was the storms that came through parts of Missouri. You can see the storms in the south. In fact, there were some beautiful storms where I am down here just offshore into parts of Georgia. We're going to keep an eye on any isolated thunderstorm events we can get out of the southwest in this pattern. And what we're going to see as we go forward is this same area. We're just going to continue to see more and more precipitation through that corridor. You've seen me draw these two lines now in, maybe the last dozen reports that I've given you. Now, later on today, we will get a brand new update from the U.S. Drought Monitor. And I want to remind you that the Drought Monitor, it is not designed to pick up on two things, flash drought or flash flooding. In other words, it won't show rapid changes on this map given the recent precipitation, for example, in the last week. They're going to update this in probably an hour after I release this video. So go to droughtmonitor.unl.edu. That's University of Nebraska at Lincoln. It's a great resource. Go check out the newest updates when they come out later today. But I wanted to showcase the change, okay? And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick up for when the pattern began to break, and then I'm going to show you what was going on before it. So the map here, it looks very busy, but this is a map of precipitation starting on the 25th of June. Now the reason I'm starting on the 25th of June was that was when that large low sat right here over parts of Michigan. You remember that one? That was the deep low that sat right there that put a donut hole over Michigan, but brought the severe weather that just moved through this part of the country. That was the beginning of the pattern break. It was then followed by multiple rounds of severe storms that went through this area, more heavy rains down here to the south, and of course the catastrophic flooding in parts of New England just recently. But you start to look at this and you see some holes. Like I'm looking through here, I'm looking on the back side of this, I'm down here in Missouri. This does not include the rainfall from late last night and early this morning, which you saw on the first radar animation. You start to see some places over here that have been drier, down into Texas. And even though we've had isolated storms in the Pacific Northwest, overall it's been drier in those areas. Now I'm going to show you what happened in the days leading up to this. So this map, first, excuse me, I got something else to show you first. This is the same time period, so here it is, June 25th to the 13th. This is also the map showing hail, because a lot of the storms that have broken through the drought have been producing straight line wind damage, tornadoes, and hail. And so many of you have been sending me pictures and images and stories about the hail. So I wanted to make for you a map from the 25th of June to the 13th of July this morning, where we have seen just some of our larger hail events. And parts of the plains into the Midwest have just been torn to shreds by some of the hail that has fallen during that time period. Now, let's go back and do this one more time, but I want to show you what happened the days before that. So here is the 25th through the 13th. This is May 10th through June 24th. Now, if you remember, this was, of course, the time where this area went into substantial drought. And the reason for this drought was high pressure that was way over here. So the flow was coming around and hitting the United States out of the east. So it ran up the Rocky Mountains. That served as the lift, okay? That's where we just begin to see the rise in motion. And there was a stalled out boundary for several days that sat in through here. Now, after I made this map this morning, I realized, well, I'm going to choose a time period of like over this stretch. So this is, of course, about 40 days here. I need to change my color bar. We had some places in here that are off the top, which was 10 inches. And so some places in through here picked up 16 to 18 inches of total precipitation. All right. But there were several pockets in through here through that stretch of days, 40 to almost 50 days, that saw less than ½ inch of total rainfall. And that's where we arrive at this statistic. That's the whole time period now, the 10th of May through the 12th of June. And even though there was rain that's been coming through these pockets, that whole stretch of days continues to show up very, very dry. This is going to be a year that is going to be very nuanced when we come back and study it, because oftentimes we break things up by calendar months, and we're going to miss out on the fact that there was, live crop saving rains that came through at times during June and into early July. That's going to be a difficult thing for us to historically. We're going to have to make sure we don't use calendar months to do this analysis. But this also illustrates places that still very much need more precipitation, and you can see them here. And that's not to ignore what's going on in the Pacific Northwest or in the southwestern United States. We're going to talk about these two areas again in a few moments. You can also see the areas that have just been constantly bombarded with rainfall. Now, knowing that there has been some precipitation that has moved through the Midwest lately, I did want to go back and show you some of the newest data we've got from NASA on NDVI values. Now, my home state of Illinois was always a place I look at first, so I clicked on it here just to show you. Once this loads, there you are. Our NDVI values really popped up here since the rainfall events that came in at late June and early July. But I was interested in some of the surrounding states like Missouri. Missouri's still well below its climatological average. And so the hope is that some of the rains that just came through are going to make a big change in that. Let me click off Missouri and show you Nebraska. Now, Nebraska is a surprising one here because some of the recent rains for the whole of the state, now remember, this includes the wetter side of Nebraska too, over here in the west, its values are actually top of the distribution now. And there have been rains that have recently come back through, parts of eastern Nebraska, which have been so very, very dry back in May and June. I'll come down to Texas because Texas has been experiencing extreme heat. It's also been tucked inside the ridge, and its values have really dropped off now below the historical average. And please go to this site. I'll link it in the links below to go look at any of the states. I just picked out a few this morning that I was just thinking about, but please check out the southeast, the northeast, and also come over here to the west and look at this too. Now, let's get into where this pattern's going, and then we'll take a look at some other historical data in just a few moments. So today, the severe weather risk is going to stretch from parts of the Ohio River Valley into parts of New England, where again, we have the risk of very heavy rainfall getting into this area. We then are going to watch much of the plains. So what's setting this up is really just two features. There still is a deep low sitting here over this part of Canada, and a ridge down here that's trying to open itself up into the west. And so as a result, we're seeing the combination of those two events set up these areas for severe weather today. This is where we're going to be watching tomorrow. Just a lot of thunderstorm activity, but the greatest risk will be here in parts of the mid-Atlantic. And then we get into day 3, which would be the 15th of July, and we're going to keep an eye here in parts of the Ohio Valley up to the eastern Great Lakes. But it's the setup, that's the story, all right? And I'm going to walk through some of the longer range stuff at the end of this video, but I'm going to preface it right now. I don't have any evidence to overturn a persistence methodology in this forecast. And what I mean by that is I think that this feature and the ridging that's happening down here are going to continue to be the mainstay of the flow through the rest of July and possibly into August. If something is going to come through and disrupt this flow, it's not yet being made evident with changes in the Arctic. It's not being made evident with changes in the North Pacific, North Atlantic. It's not being yet made with changes coming out of the tropics. I mean, the MJO is stuck in null space. We don't see major movement in it that I can have any confidence in. To be honest, I think what might change this pattern up would be a hurricane here or a hurricane here or a typhoon way over in the Pacific Ocean. That's what I'm going to have to be watching for. So this is it. This is your pattern right now in the near term. So let's go to the high-res models, pick this up at 7 a.m. this morning, and as I just play this throughout the day today, a couple of things to take note of. A lot of scattered storms. That you just saw that a few moments ago. We'll be keeping a close eye on 2 locations here and here, but take a look at the heavy rains that could be coming through parts of New England tonight. Any additional rainfall here is going to cause more of a flooding threat. But we see parts of the Ohio Valley tonight getting severe storms, parts of the plains getting up the upper Midwest. And this is just the mainstay of the flow. Now, could we produce another big mesoscale convective system rolling through this part of Oklahoma? Sure. I mean, this has been an extremely wet place over the last month or so, and what a contrast it is to last year. I showed you that earlier this week. But then you get into Friday, and you see it again. So just watch this. If I just play it quickly, you can see the 2 factors working to give you this pattern, right? There's the deeper low here, the ridge opening up over Texas, and so the flow just follows that. And that's where we finally have better motion in the atmosphere. So no model's going to get this right for you. You're just going to have to watch radar all day if you're going to stay ahead of these storms and do a lot of nowcasting rather than forecasting. So let's just put it together, kind of distilled into a couple of maps here. Precipitation. This is our next 7 days from the WPC. So there's that corridor again of most active weather. And we're also going to watch for some type of ridge riding events coming here over the Texas ridge. The drier regions that continue to concern me are going to be in this area. Isolated storms will come through here, but I'm concerned about that particular spot, getting moisture into it, significant moisture to cover a large area. But you can see where the rains are expected to be heaviest. All right. The west, as this ridge opens up, is going to bring in a tremendous amount of heat. I'll show you that in a few moments, with isolated storm events that run around the top of the ridge that's going to be opening here. They're not well represented in this map. But if I show you what the pattern's up to, I think it'll all start to make sense. So we're playing through the end of this week into the weekend. And what do we have? We just still have that same look we've talked about all week. There's ridges here. There's a ridge that's coming into the western United States. And overall, it's going to be the size and shape of this ridge combined with the downstream trough that determine the precipitation patterns and the heat for the United States. Now, always when we have a trough flanking, or right here off the west coast, We need to keep an eye out for what this could mean for storms that are going to come into the Pacific Northwest that won't be resolved by the models. There will be isolated storm events out of troughs like this, and they could get here into the Canadian Prairie. I would love nothing more than to see storms get into this area by midweek next week, given that that is a region that has experienced drought. We've covered that lately, just showing you some of the drought indicators here for the Canadian Prairie. But the ridge kind of opens up across the whole southern tier of the United States by next Wednesday. But we've watched a model trend that has tried to take that ridge back to the west as we get here into the third and then finally the fourth week of the month of July. So this seems to be the mainstay of the pattern. Troughs here, large ridges opening up into this area. And so what this does is it produces a lot of northwest flow in the midsection of the country. This produces a lot of heat in the southwest, ridge riding storms, but no strong indicators that this area will go over to sustained heat while we absolutely bake the southern tier of the United States into the southwest. I need to have evidence to say that something is going to shove that pattern away, and right now I think persistence is the best bet in the forecast. So let's just look at where we expect it to be stormy versus where we expect it to be drier. We did see an increase in this area, primarily because of that trough I showed you sneaking through there next week, increasing storm chances. But other than that, it's right in through here that our best odds are for the wettest conditions. Now what we've got north of that is just coming around that deeper low, so there are better chances of rainfall in this area as well. But you can see the stormiest corridors. This is the probability of getting at least an inch of rain over the next 10 days. So not much overall changing in this pattern. Let's look out there to week 2. One thing that the CPC did change was it tried to bring in drier conditions here into week 2. And that's kind of reflected something that the European model has seen for a while. But before I make the call that this area is actually going to be fully dry, starting next Thursday to the following Thursday, not fully dry, but a drier risk, we have to see where the ridge position is truly going to be at that point. And if it does open farther here into the Intermountain West, you're going to have isolated storm events that roll through this area that are not being captured by the models. So there's a drier risk, but not dry, okay? So all three models stacked up here to see what the week 2 pattern is going to look like. Take note, though, that much of the east just remains wet during this time period. A lot of activity going on there. Now, what I was trying to get to in this is that pattern, what it's going to do to our temperatures, because this has, of course, been hitting the major news headlines. And so let's talk about temperatures. If we go back to when the pattern broke, this is, again, the 27th of June through the 12th of July. This is what we've seen. Our heat has been confined primarily to the southern tier of the United States, although it's been quite warm here in parts of New England, but very hot south. And then we have had heat building at times into the western United States. But you can clearly see how cool it has been compared to average in the central U.S. So thinking about that, I made a map that I'm going to start putting just routinely in my reports. This one is showing you accumulated stress. So these are stress degree days as defined in a paper in 2013 by Dr. Ellen Taylor. So what we're doing is we're just looking at how many degrees each day added up from April 1st that have been over 86 degrees. So let's just say today hit 96 degrees, you'd pick up 10 stress degree days. Now there's a difference in my coloring here where I make everything over 140 red or some shade of red getting up to pink and white. And I do that because of Ellen Taylor's research. He said that when you get above those values, you start to see crop losses in certain crops. He was primarily looking at corn, but it's still, we're just kind of trying to get a break here to see where the heat has really, really been. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, well, is this year like 2012 and what happened? And of course, for many, the recent precipitation has taken that year out of their brains as an analog. But I do want to show you what did happen in 2012 because it's a reminder that when the heat began in 2012 was when it kind of quit in 2023. So this was what 2012 looked like from June 27th through the 13th of July. This is when the heat just poured on in the midsection of the country. The drought really began during that stretch of days. And we were cooler south and cooler west, so we do not have that this year. And if you're curious, this is, again, this year's stress degree days. This is what they look like at this point in July of 2012, okay? So major differences here in where the heat has been. Now, as you know, the heat is right now pouring into the south. It is stretching into the west. We have heat advisories, heat watches, and excessive heat warnings out for so many places here across the southern tier of the United States. I do find it amazing that in Death Valley, the excessive heat warning actually doesn't take effect until Saturday, I think it is. So I was down here looking at this, those temperatures. In fact, let's go do that. That'll be just kind of fun. Agweather.com. Let's come in here. Sorry, my hotel internet's a bit slow today. Here we go. Let's go to Furnace Creek. I do have that in the database. And as we run the forecast for Furnace Creek, sorry, it's taking just a moment here on my system. Again, this hotel internet, there we go. Okay. Take a look here. There it is. 117 today, 128 by Sunday. It will cool down to 90. Wow, it'll cool down to 100 degrees. That'll be the overnight low on Monday. Monday morning, 100 degrees is what the temperatures are going to be when they wake up. So far, they've had 1.1 inches of rainfall since the beginning of the year. And it's just amazing to see these temperatures and their spread throughout the day. Gosh, it just blows my mind to know what this is like. Their average temperature over the next 7 days is 110 Fahrenheit, which is 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than normal. And they've already picked up over 5,000 GDDs since the beginning of the year. So just fun statistics here from one of the driest places and hottest places on Earth. Okay, so back to it. What are the temperatures up to? Today's highs, getting into tomorrow, this Friday, Saturday, that's when the heat really pours on here. Sunday, now watch the transition in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, there's a lot of cooler air here, except for right in this part of Missouri. But then you're going to see on Monday that trough coming through. Now, this is the one that could bring the storms into the Canadian prairie. There it is on Tuesday sweeping through and on Wednesday. But you stitch together these next 7 days, there's a lot of heat from Texas all the way into California. I'll be watching this area very carefully. There's been a lot of reports here, especially in the state of Missouri, of just completely wiped out crops, even with some of the recent rains, but the heat tends to stay on in that particular region. Looking out there longer term, this would be the week 2 risk of hazardous temperatures. We just continue to see the risk of excessive heat building here from Texas through the Intermountain West to the Great Basin. That's where the greatest risk is going to be. And if I just kind of slide you through that 5-day forecast of average temperature anomalies, there's day 5 through 10, so this gets us out to the 23rd of July. And pressing forward, we've continued to see the models be very reluctant on bringing in heat into this section of the country until the very end of the month of July, right in through here. Most of it's staying south and staying west. All right. Now from here, I just want to tell you the longer range forecast, without a strong signal coming from the MJO, what's going to break down that ridge? We look out here over the 30-day time period of the 20th of July to the 20th of August, and the pattern just looks exactly like it does now. There's a trough feature here. There's some sort of ridge of high pressure that's meandering between Texas and California, and in the middle, the flow just sticks around. We have motion flow in that area. Now, what the models are going to show you during this time period in terms of precipitation anomalies is the longer range models are going to show a lot of dry weather in here. And the reason is that this model isn't going to pick up on where those ridge riding storms are going to sit. It's not designed to. It's just looking at the flow, and the flow is coming around the north side of a ridge, so it's more convergent in the dynamics of the model. But we know we get storms out of it. We do expect to continue to stay wet east. That, though, has been a really strong signal in the models for quite some time. It's reflected in every major long-range model. But I'll just be honest, I don't know what is out there that's going to kick this pattern out, because we still have our main features. Very warm water here, the negative Pacific meridional mode there. We've got El Nino continuing to develop here, the positive phase of the Indian Ocean dipole in the Indian Ocean, and boiling hot water. I mean, just here in the Atlantic. You know, I'm down here, and I went out to the beach yesterday just to see what the water felt like coming right here off the coast of Georgia. And I've never felt such warm water in this area. We still have ocean temperatures down here in the Bahamas and the southern tip of Florida that are, past 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Very, very warm. So I'll just make this as kind of a final statement as to where I think this pattern's going to go. We will persist with that ridge feature sitting here and a trough feature sitting here for a while. But watch the Western Pacific, watch the Eastern Pacific, and watch the Atlantic in the coming days and weeks. I think if there's going to be something that breaks the pattern over, I'm not going to be watching the Arctic for it. I think it might be a typhoon, or it might be a tropical system out of the Eastern Pacific, or one out of the Atlantic that starts to disrupt this pattern. Until then, you saw what we're looking at over the next 2 weeks and over the month that follows that. I think that's going to be the mainstay of the pattern. So I'm not going to go searching for things that aren't there and try to make a story out of them. I think this is what we're in for a while. If that breaks, I'll of course tell you about it. But with that, I'll wrap it up, and I'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow morning. Thanks.